As an Orthodox Jew, as well, all of my secular Jewish relatives who don't give a damn about Israel feel with the Democratic Party. So, the title of the speech is Why Freedom Succeeds and Collectivism Fails. So here's your answer. Government sucks, you don't. And now Alan West. No, so the real answer, of course, is that diffuse knowledge beats centralized knowledge. Turns out that if you took all the collective knowledge in this room, we'd all know more collectively than Einstein did, and that means that no one person is qualified to run a country, is qualified to run a branch of government, really, is qualified to run any of the regulatory agencies, is qualified to run our lives. But I want to answer a slightly broader question here today, which is not why freedom succeeds and collectivism fails. We all sort of know that question. The real question is, why does freedom succeed, collectivism fails, and yet collectivism wins? Because that's sort of what we are watching happen right now. Like, there's no doubt that freedom succeeds and collectivism fails. When my great-grandfather came over to the United States in 1921 from Russia, he spoke no English, he didn't have any money. He came here, he lived with family, he learned English, he started a business, he worked, and now here I am standing with you at a very elegant hotel talking about the shortcomings of the American government. That's how freedom works. My great-grandfather's relatives did not come to the United States. They all stayed in Russia, and then they moved to Warsaw, and then they were gassed in Auschwitz, and that's how collectivism works. Make no mistake, okay, this collectivism, that is the evil that we face. It comes with a smiley face, it comes with promises of new rights, it tells you that it's here to do you good, but it is not here to do you good. It comes with guns, right? It comes with guns. Every law that we pass, every law that's on the books, every regulation is backed by a gun. And this is something the left is very uncomfortable with because they like to think of themselves as pacifists. They like to say that we on the right are the people who love guns. Right, we love guns to protect life, liberty, and property. They love guns to put them in our faves and take those things away from us. Every law, in the end, is backed by a gun, which is why if you're a florist and you're trying to mind your own business and you feel that, for example, as a religious person, you don't feel that it's your responsibility or you feel it would actually be a sin for you to participate in a same-sex wedding, they will come and they will try and shut down your business. And then if you refuse to shut down your business, then they will fine you. And if you refuse to pay the fine, then they will send men with guns to get you. And if you resist, they will shoot you. Every law at the end of the day is backed by a gun, which is why we have to be so careful as to what kind of power we give to government in the first place. Now, this is not to be anarchist. Some laws require the use of guns, invasions of life, liberty, and property. These require the use of guns. But people who believe that are not collectivists. Those are individualists. Collectivists believe in the use of the gun all the time. They are addicted to the gun. And they are addicted to them having guns and you not having guns. Individualists, look, we want to protect ourselves. Collectivists want to take things away from us. So here's the question. With our long history of collectivism failing and freedom winning, why is it that collectivism actually wins? And the answer is actually pretty simple. Collectivism wins because we don't think it's evil. We don't think it's evil. And we don't think that evil is possible in a place like the United States. See, evil is for guys with funny haircuts and little mustaches who speak in German. And evil is for people who play polo with goats' heads and then go and perform female genital mutilation on their daughters. Right? Evil is far away from us. Evil is something that's not, it's not us, it's not here. And the people here who are promoting collectivism, they're not evil, they're good guys. See, they believe in the Declaration, they believe in the Constitution, they believe in their families, they're nice people. They all have all the best intentions, They're just incompetent. They're just not good at what they do. Right? They just have the wrong ideas. And here's the thing. It's easy for the collectivists to make this case in the absence of any countervailing force. If we don't shout out, then it's easy for them to make this case because they'll tell you what kind of wonderful intentions they have. See, their intention in being collectivists is to shut you down, and of course you are a bunch of racist, sexist, bigot, homophobes who hate the poor. And that's why we need collective power, because as individuals, you're all bad folks. You're all bad people. Collectivism is only justified to protect our rights, and if the rights aren't threatened by individuals, then there's no justification for the collectivists. So that's why they have to say that we are the violation of rights. We are the rights violators. Right? We're the bad guys, they're the good guys. So it's time for us to recognize, for just a moment, what collectivists are. And they are emissaries of an evil ideology. And we have to call it by its name. It is evil. It is not decency. It is not well-intentioned. It is evil. Now, we know all that not just because of the impact of their policies, of course. We know that not because of the literally hundreds of millions of dead bodies strewn around the globe thanks to the Soviet Union, thanks to China, thanks to various other communist countries, North Korea. We know that also not because of the crushing poverty that the collectivists have produced in places across the globe today, ranging from South America to Africa to Asia to Detroit. Right? We know that it's not just evil because of what collectivism does, it's evil because of what collectivism intends to do. In fact, collectivism, and this is what I'm going to talk about here, collectivism violates every single one of the 10 Commandments. That is the definition of evil to me. If you violate even one of the 10 Commandments, you're in trouble. You violate all 10, and you're in serious, particularly with God. So I'm a fan of the 10 Commandments, as the Yarmulke attests. It's a well-written document. You know, it's got style. It's got grace. It's really well done. Well played, God. And so I want to go through these because I think it's important for folks to understand why collectivism wins and what the threat of collectivism is. And we need to speak about these things in moral terms. See, the big problem that we have here with the sirloin crowd is that all of us who like sirloin like to discuss things in measured tones. See, this is a hobby to us. We all have jobs. We all have families. We all have lives. We all have things that we would rather do than talk about the folks on the other side or even talk with the folks on the other side. And so we like to attribute to them all the best intentions. We like to attribute to them that they think right because we know these folks. And many of them don't know what they're talking about. Many of them are just ignorant. But the reality is that when you're polite, you lose. When you're polite, you lose. Mitt Romney learned this in 2012. Mitt Romney spent his entire campaign explaining to the American people that Barack Obama was a very, very nice guy who believed in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. He just sucked at his job. And Barack Obama spent the entire campaign saying that Mitt Romney strapped dogs to the roof of cars, wanted to put you all back in chains, had binders full of women because he hated women, and specifically fired a guy just so that his wife would 6 years later die of cancer without insurance. Is it any wonder that Mitt Romney loses that race? Because most Americans who are busy watching American Idol are going to tune in for the last 5 minutes of the race, and what they're going to accept is this particular narrative, right? Good guy, bad manager versus Darth Vader. So let's speak the truth for just a moment. I know it makes some folks uncomfortable because, you know, the truth always makes some folks uncomfortable. Let's go through the 10 Commandments and explain how it is that collectivism is a threat to each and every one of the 10 Commandments. First of all, the first commandment, I'm the Lord thy God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of bondage. This is fundamental opposition to collectivism. If we're all individuals created in the image of God, we're special and precious, and that means that no one gets to invade our rights just because they think that they are superior to us. Our rights, it turns out that they matter more than the government. You know, for 3 millennia, for the Jewish people, and for more than 2 centuries in America, the working theory has been that if you tell me that I am supposed to respect God above government, you will meet me at my door with a gun. And guess what? Millions of people have died for their God, and I promise you this, I will go to jail, I will pick up a gun before the government of the United States tells me I'm supposed to violate my religious precepts. Okay, second commandment, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Not government, and not fairness, not a certain someone. A certain someone about whom his wife said, quote, our souls are broken in this nation and he can heal you, or he will never allow you to go back to your lives as usual, uninvolved, uninformed. I was at the 2012 DNC, which was one of the scariest experiences of my life. And when I was at the DNC, it actually was a frightening experience because it was a cult-like atmosphere. You went to the, for those who were at the DNC, I'm glad you made it out alive. Congratulations. And when you went there, there was actually, believe it or not, an actual stone statue. It was a sand statue of President Obama. Really. It was a sand statue. It was out on the street of President Obama. They'd actually removed the iconography of the Democratic Party. The donkey was gone. Right? There was no donkey anywhere to be found. It was all Barack Obama's face, or that supremely creepy icon, the Obama icon with the red O and then the blue people underneath, or maybe it was a blue O and the red people underneath, whatever it was. And it had been completely substituted. There was an idolatrous worship of the president, something that I'd never seen in American politics. Now, we on the right, we like Ronald Reagan, but it turns out that when we go to bed at night, we don't light a little candle in our closet for him. We understand that Ronald Reagan was a human being who did some incredibly wonderful things and also did some stuff that wasn't so great. Folks on the left don't think like that. Collectivists can't afford to think like that. Collectivists have to think in terms of idols. They have to worship something because that's how human beings are made. We are made to worship something. And it's either going to be God or it's going to be government or it's going to be an idol. Okay. Third commandment that gets broken by collectivists on a routine basis. Collectivism, it always masquerades as godly, right? The third commandment is thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Right? If I have to hear President Obama one more time cite the book of Matthew, the least of these, okay, look, I'm an Orthodox Jew. Jesus is not my guy. Well, he originally was one of my guys, but now, it turns out not. And, but when Barack Obama cites the book of Matthew, okay, and first of all, does not know 2 Thessalonians 3:10, right? If any would not work, neither shall they eat, right? And when he's not spending his time misquoting the Bible, he's berating the Bible in 2006. I don't know if you've ever seen this speech. It's worth watching. He gave a speech in which he talked about all of the flaws in the Bible. He said, quote, which passages of Scripture should guide our public policy? Should we go with Leviticus, which suggests slavery is okay and that eating shellfish is an abomination? Well, first of all, Barack, you don't know much about Leviticus and you don't know much about the commentaries, but beyond that, there's still some of us who actually think that eating shellfish is an abomination. Right? I haven't had an oyster for my entire life. The use of God by folks on the collective left in order to manipulate the Bible, to get to people, to make them feel like they're moderate, this is what the left has to do. This is what the collectivists have to do. There's less credibility to the theory that Barack Obama can quote 2 consecutive Bible verses than to the theory that he's born in Kenya. Okay. Obama likes the Bible like he likes the Constitution, roasted with just a bit of barbecue sauce. Fourth commandment, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. This is the idea that your labor belongs to God. Right? Your labor is God, it's not government's. And it's the idea that you get to act out your religion in public life. So keeping the Sabbath is not just, first of all, it's the greatest thing in my life, obviously. If you saw me walking around yesterday, and I'm sorry to folks I couldn't take a picture with, but that's why. The Sabbath is a wonderful thing for all religious people because it's an acknowledgement that this is not ours. Right? This is God's. And so collectivists hate the Sabbath because it's not ours and it's not God's, it's theirs. By the way, it's the Sabbath that keeps us a charitable people. It's that recognition that this is not our property that keeps us giving charity. The minute you take away Sabbath, the minute you take away the notion that your property is not yours but God's, then charity goes away. Right? Charity, the Sabbath, these are there to make us good people. That's the goal. Collectivists are there to make us bad people. They want us to be bad people because then that justifies, of course, more collectivism. Fifth commandment is to honor thy father and thy mother. The left is not big into this. The collectivists are not. The Communist Manifesto is extraordinarily clear about this. The Communist Manifesto reads, and this is a direct quote, on what foundation is the present family, the bourgeois family, based? And by the way, folks, when you read the word bourgeois from the Communist Manifesto, it's not talking about rich people. Okay, bourgeois is that vaunted middle class that you hear folks in the tofu party talk about a fair bit. And they're not real big on it. Communist Manifesto says, on capital, on private gain. In its completely developed form, the family exists only among the bourgeois, but this state of things finds its complement in the practical absence of the family among the proletarians and in the public prostitution. In other words, the breakdown of the family is necessary for communitarianism because the family is the core element that protects you against the vicissitudes of life. It's where you find your protection. It means you don't need government. And in fact, it means you want government to leave you alone because you have people that you need to take care of now. If you break down the family, you're building up the government. There are no two ways about it. And that's what the collectivists want. Beyond that, obviously, honoring your father and your mother means that you actually have to respect the wisdom of the past, which is something that collectivists don't do. They want to remake the world every generation, and they'll tell you things like the youth are the people who know what they're talking about. I'm 30. Young people are morons. Okay, they haven't paid, especially now that we're on our parents' insurance until we're 26, so we're still paying Call of Duty in mom and dad's basement in this state smoking pot legally. And we're the wisest among us? Yeah. Like say, the policies would be replete with the word dude if they were written by people under the age of 30. It's a great story about Ronald Reagan back when he was governor of California, and there was a demonstration over at UC Berkeley. And he went down to deal with the demonstration. He was speaking down there, and some hippie kid comes up to him as he's driving away in his limo, in his motorcade, and holds up a sign that says, "We are the future." And Reagan grabs a piece of paper, and he writes something down. He holds up to the window, and it says, "I'll sell my bonds." The sixth commandment, and this one is probably, in many ways, the worst of all, if you violate, is thou shalt not murder, of course. And in order for collectivists to have their way, they have to be in utter and complete control of human life. And that means that murder is nothing to collectivists. Nothing to collectivists, really. And I understand that it's gauche to talk about things like abortion. I understand it makes people feel bad, and that we in this country suffer from what I like to call "you ruined my day" syndrome. And when I was at the DNC, one of the most perverse things that I saw at the DNC is I'm walking along on the sidewalk, and there's a guy, and he's wearing a button that says, "I love pro-choice girls." You can imagine why he loves pro-choice girls. And he's walking directly past a pro-life demonstration, and the pro-life demonstrators are holding up the pictures, the horrific pictures of the aborted babies. And I'm from California. I'm from LA. I grew up in a very cosmopolitan area. I've spent my entire life in either Los Angeles or Cambridge, Massachusetts, two conservative hotbeds. And so it occurred to me, because you're reflexively trained to do this when you live in leftist areas, collectivist areas, that this is gauche, right? This is rude. And then I realized, no. This is reality, right? This is reality, because it turns out that abortion is evil. It turns out that abortion is murder. And collectivists have to demean the value of human life so that everybody just becomes a scrambled egg in the omelet that they're cooking. So it does not matter if people abort their babies. It doesn't matter. In fact, it's an affirmative good, and you're depriving people of a right. Because guess who gets to define life? The government gets to define life. And you personally, based on how you feel that day, get to define what is or is not a human life. Which, by the way, is exactly the same argument that slaveholders in the 1850s made on a routine basis. That they get to define what constitutes property and what constitutes human life. You do not get to decide what constitutes human life. God did it, and it's pretty clear. The seventh commandment, routinely violated by the collectivists: thou shalt not commit adultery. Let that one sit there for a while. Collectivists love the idea of there being no difference whatsoever between the sexes, that everybody is basically a widget in their magical system. And there's nothing that has created more unhappiness in the Western world than this idea, that men and women are created identical except for their genitalia. And anybody who is above the age of 3 can tell you that this is not the case. I mean, honestly, it does not take a higher intellect to recognize the differences between men and women. But by eviscerating those differences, by pretending that those differences do not matter and that those differences are in fact dangerous and that those have to be put away, what you're doing is you're undermining any possibility of a viable relationship between a man and a woman. Adultery means nothing for the collectivist, because sex means nothing to the collectivist, because family means nothing to the collectivist, because in the end, commitment doesn't mean anything to the collectivist. Because when you're pursuing utopia, everything is just either a tool or an obstacle. Those are the only things that collectivists are interested in, tools or obstacles. That's it. And so it turns out that fidelity and family are obstacles. Eighth commandment, thou shalt not steal. Okay, this one I should not even have to explain why collectivists violate this as a rule. It is legalized thievery. Okay, collectivism is legalized thievery. If you and I decided today that we're going to vote amongst ourselves, and we're going to drive over to Bill Gates' house after we take our vote and we've decided that Bill Gates' money is actually ours, and we're going to go over to his house, and we're going to put a gun to his head, and then we're going to steal his wallet, that would make us evil. If you and your friends decided to vote and then go down to a nunnery, put a gun to a nun's head, drive her down to Rite Aid, and force you to buy a pack of condoms, you're Sandra Fluke. Or the editorial board of the New York Times, or the President of the United States, or a 4-member minority of the Supreme Court. Collectivism is evil. That is evil. Just because you think you have a right to something doesn't mean you have a right to take it from your neighbors. Ninth commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Lies mean nothing to collectivists. Truth is not of value. Dennis Prager has said this. To the left, truth is not of value, and he's exactly right. They have higher values. They're pursuing something broader, something bigger, something more important. And that's why they'll lie to your face. And then when you say you're lying, they'll say so. Or they'll pretend it doesn't matter. It's why Joe Biden, Joe Biden he's a phenomenal liar. He's a phenomenal liar. When he pastes on the Cesar Romero grin and he just starts lying in vice presidential debates like he's the villain from Batman, it's, they should have shot that debate off kilter, like just at a 25-degree angle. And then at the end it goes, you get the spinning picture. Truth is a belief that I owe something to the individual. I owe you the truth. Collectivism doesn't believe that anything is owed to the individual. All is owed to the state. And so if the state decides to lie to you, then it's justified because, after all, you're bad, the state is good. And finally, the last commandment, the 10th commandment that the collectivists violate, and this, again, this whole thing is about why collectivism is evil. And these are the terms you need to argue to your friends. It is evil. It is not misguided. It is evil. The 10th commandment is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's ass, which, of course, was written specifically by God for Bill Clinton. Collectivism, this is the one that collectivism violates most of all. It's inherently based on jealousy. It's based on the idea that your neighbor's property is yours. So what's interesting is that in Judaism, there are a bunch of commentaries on this particular commandment, and it says that you're allowed to say about your neighbor, that guy's got a really nice car, I'd like a car like that. What you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to say, I'd like that car. Right? Jealousy is the root of everything that the collectivists believe. Right? This is why when you hear about income inequality, it's nonsense. Okay, they don't care about the poor. In fact, they want the poor to stay poor so they can talk about income inequality. They want the poor to be poor. They want more poor people. When they say that there's a war on poverty, well, the right side is winning according to them, and it's poverty. Income inequality is an affirmative good for the folks who argue against income inequality, because the truth is that income inequality is the stupidest argument in the world. If everybody's getting richer, why do you care what your neighbor has? I would rather live in the really, really nice house next to Bill Gates and have a lot of income inequality with Bill Gates than be income equal in Detroit. Okay, so to wrap this all up in a bow, collectivism, it wins. The reason that it loses in the long run, but it wins in the short run, is because when we refuse to speak in moral terms, the collectivists win. Because they always speak in moral terms, right? We're bad, they're good. We're violating rights, they're standing up for rights. They speak in moral terms incessantly, and we never do, and it's a mistake. And we have to understand that evil is out there and that it exists. The DNC, and when I've compared some folks in America today with collectivists of the past, people get uncomfortable. Except that the slogan of the DNC, they actually put this up on their big board in 2012, was government is the only thing we all belong to. That was actually on their board. It was so bad that the Obama campaign had to actually disown it. The Obama campaign had to come out and say, we don't believe that. Which, of course, like everything else that comes out, all the other sounds that emerge from President Obama's face it was not true. And, one of the things that I've realized in the last 6 months, I'm a new father. I have a baby. And she has been scientifically measured as the most beautiful baby that was ever made. I know you all think that it's true about your kids. I promise you. I've done the research. There have been polls. It's poll tested. And, it's a new thing when you have your first baby. She's gorgeous, and we love her very much, of course. And one night, my wife and I we're trying to get her to sleep, and she was having trouble sleeping through the night. So like every new parent, we're freaking out, because what do you do when the baby won't sleep through the night? And so I go in there, and she's woken herself up, and she's crying. And I go in there, I put my hand on her chest, and I start rocking her back and forth. And I find myself, as you can tell, I'm not Captain Emotionally Open. I've never been given a sensitivity award. But I'm sitting there, and I'm rocking my baby back and forth, and I find myself crying, which is rare, at least, not around tax time. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm rocking the baby back and forth, and I find myself tearing up. And the reason that I'm tearing up is because it's occurring to me for the first time, like it does for a lot of new parents, I would imagine, for the first time, which is there's going to come a point where my baby is crying and I'm not going to be there. Right? There will be a point where, sometime, God willing, 90 years down the road, there's a problem in her life and I'm not going to be there to solve it. And she has to have the freedom and the capacity to solve the problem for herself. Evil enervates us. Evil takes that power away from us. It takes away our ability, our will. It saps us of our God-given capacity to solve problems on our own and to make the world a better place and to rock our children to sleep at night, because after all, that's not our job. That it takes a village. Freedom is about the future. It's about what we want to give our kids. And our job is to fight collectivist evil. It's to fight collectivism. Yes, freedom succeeds and freedom wins, but only if we fight. Don't be afraid, though. The nice thing about the Ten Commandments, there's a whole bunch of books that come along with it. And we learn in one of them, in Isaiah 8:10, God is with us. Isaiah writes, devise your strategy, but it will be thwarted. Propose your plan, but it will not stand, for God is with us. And God is with us. He is with us, and God will be with us for so long as we forge forth to fight for the freedom that he granted us. Thanks so much.